Welcome to the third Sunday of Advent, where we are ready to make the third stop on our roundabout journey to Bethlehem. After the imposing grandeur of imperial Rome and the awe-inspiring holiness of the temple in Jerusalem, we could have just hopped right over to Bethlehem. It was just a few miles from Jerusalem after all, but instead, we are going to make a detour and visit Nazareth. Nazareth? Nazareth is a pretty bustling city nowadays, but back in the day, in the first century, it was a tiny little bump in the road, blink and you miss it, nowhere kind of place. Good place to be from, as they say, only if you were from Nazareth, people might not expect very much from you. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? Someone once asked when he was introduced to a Nazarene carpenter / wandering preacher named Jesus. Nothing much was expected of Nazareth. Why bother looking there for anything good? In Nazareth, you might have found a couple hundred people, no more than 400, because the whole town was served by one single well. More than a few hundred people just could not live there. So Nazareth was never what you would call a thriving place. And yet, Nazareth was the place where an angel chose to appear to a girl called Mary, telling her that she had found favor with God and would bear a holy child who would be called the Son of God. Mary had one question: how can this be? Because, she wasn't exactly married yet, just engaged. That was a good question, but it is not the only question she could have asked. Personally, I have more questions, like, why Mary? Wouldn't it have been much easier for it to be another woman, maybe older and wiser, someone with an actual husband, someone who might have been in a more socially and financially secure position? Someone like, I don't know, Mary's cousin Elizabeth, who was in the 6th month of her own pregnancy with John the Baptist. Why did wise old Elizabeth only get to deliver the messenger while the teenage mom was chosen to raise the Son of God? Also, why Nazareth? Why not Jerusalem, where Elizabeth lived, where the Holy Child could grow up going to the temple every single day, learning from the best biblical scholars of the time? Wouldn't that have made more sense? Jerusalem was the epicenter of religious life. What was young Jesus supposed to learn growing up in a one-horse town that barely had a synagogue? How could the Son of God come from Nazareth? Could anything good come out of Nazareth? I am well aware of the limitations of small towns. I live in one, and having raised a child in this small town, I know there are certain advantages you just can't give your child. There aren't enough people to support all the activities a child might enjoy, so maybe forget about your kid becoming a concert violinist or world chess champion. Small schools offer limited classes, so the leap to university is a big one, and not all the kids make it. Many people choose to live in bigger towns, specifically so that their kids can have a wider array of experiences. I get it. And I wonder if Mary sometimes wondered, am I giving Jesus enough enrichment for him to do the work God is calling him to do? And yet, there is something about these small, simple places that might have been exactly what God needed for Jesus' formation. Nazareth was a place where people depended upon each other for survival. There is no such thing as other people's children in a town like that. Everyone knows who you are and where you belong. That deep sense of connection means that everything you do has an impact on everyone else in town. There is no chance to look away from suffering. If one person feels pain, everyone feels it, and they feel an obligation to help. A town that small is like a big family. And into this family, Jesus, who would be called Son of God, but who would call himself Son of Man, was raised. Nazareth taught the Son of God how to be part of the human family. Nazareth also taught Jesus how to live simply. This is a natural lesson in small towns. When you grow up where there isn't much, you learn how to be content with little. I wonder if Jerusalem could have raised such a child. When every street is full of beautiful merchandise, more things than you even need, how do you learn to be content with the simplicity of just a little? when your teachers are the most learned people in the world, perhaps overly confident in their expertise, how does a child learn humility? And if your father is a respected priest and your mother one of the most influential ladies in the church, how do you develop a true sense of compassion for the poor, the marginalized, and the sinners? Maybe Jesus needed to be raised in little old Nazareth by a teen mom with a tarnished reputation and a poor carpenter with a big heart. Nazareth invites us to reconsider our own relationship with simplicity. We are conditioned to want the best and more of it. But Nazareth taught Jesus to be content with good enough and to share until everyone had a little. We don't know much about his childhood, but the adult Jesus was known to feed a crowd of thousands with a little bread and fish. That's the kind of thing you learn in a place like Nazareth, where one hungry person is everyone's concern. You probably heard about the bystander effect. That's what happens in crowded places when everyone assumes that someone else is going to help those in need, and in the end, no one does anything and suffering goes unabated. In big cities, you can see the bystander effect in every doorway of every sidewalk, where the unhoused persons are practically invisible to the bustling crowds walking by. Not so in a place like Nazareth, where everyone knows your name. The Nazareth of Jesus' time may not have been a place of bright lights and dazzling displays of opulence. Nazareth was not a place of wow, but a place of whoa, as in slow down, take your time, be present, connect. Have you ever known a place or a time like that? A Nazareth time for me was 2020, remember? Yeah, that was pandemic. Not a place anyone ever wanted to be. It was scary, it was surreal, people were dying. It was perhaps the bleakest collective event we have ever experienced in our lifetimes. And yet I remember the sweet simplicity of life at home with my family, just the three of us. We fell into an unhurried rhythm of work and school, but without the need to go anywhere. We had so much extra time. We spent long afternoons hiking, learning the names of wildflowers. I remember one exquisitely beautiful spring day, the perfect temperature, a little sun, and just enough drizzle to keep us on the watch for rainbows. We were out walking, and my teenage daughter said, "I think spring is my favorite season." I used to think it was summer, but I guess I never knew how wonderful spring was, being so busy with school and inside a classroom all day. It was a magical moment to watch her discover the simple joy of a sweet, slow spring day. And there were many moments like that during that time of simplified living. I'm not saying I would wish pandemic upon the world again. It was an awful, horrible time in so many ways. And yet, when I ask myself, can anything good come from pandemic? We learned to slow down, to be more intentional about how we spent our precious time. Maybe we need to spend a little more time savoring Nazareth-style simplicity. As we prepare to celebrate the advent of Jesus' birth, we may find our greatest joy in the simplest things. I am finding this to be true in my home this year. I haven't had the time to put up much by way of decor, and anything I do set out is an immediate target for the new cat, whose personal mission in life is to destroy Christmas. But I love the one strand of white lights glowing in the sunroom, and I have a candle, which I don't dare light because of the cat, but it's still pretty, and it's enough. I also decided mostly to opt out of shopping cards and baking. My decision to simplify is helping me to focus on what matters the most, which for me is preparing for Advent and Christmas Eve worship and getting ready for the Christmas cantata. Aside from those events, I am planning a simple Christmas, and that is bringing me great joy. It's far too easy to get caught up in the frenzy of all the things you're supposed to do to have a perfect Christmas, but consider Nazareth. In a place like that, God's word became flesh. Nazareth is where a simple girl heard the good news. Fear not, God is with you. In Nazareth, we are invited to remember that God is still with us. God does not need a lot of fuss or frenzy. God simply needs our open hearts, which God is longing to fill with great joy. Find your Nazareth, and something good will